The key to success is biting off more than you can chew and then figuring out how to chew it. And that hit me pretty hard because, I'm thinking to myself like, yep, that's about it. Honestly, man, if I wasn't netting $2 million in revenue next year at this time, I would be a failure because it's all there to be had. More money, more problems.
That's right, man. Well, everybody, welcome back to the Mo Money, Mo Problems podcast. It's a podcast dedicated to the trials, triumphs, and insights of green industry business owners. I'm your host, Matt Foreman, and today we got a very special guest with Pat Condon of 3C Land and Ag Services out in Fort Pierce, Florida. Pat, dude, so pumped to have you.
But thanks for having me, man. Likewise, likewise. I could be happier and prouder, quite frankly, to be with you guys, and really looking forward to the podcast and getting to chat and tell my story and get to know you all a little bit better.
Yeah, man, and you got a story. There's a lot about you. I mean, I've been lucky enough to spend a few months learning a bit more about you, and obviously, I barely have scratched the surface. We can see here that you obviously live on an amazing property. You have your own horses. You got all your own equipment, all your own gear, man. And yeah, it seems like you're doing some pretty amazing stuff. So I would love to know how'd you get to where you're at? I know it's gonna be a loaded question, but, how'd you get at least started in, the green industry?
Man, so I'll tell you, the green industry in whatever facet that may be is something that I've wanted to make a career since I was 5 years old. I went to school at the University of Florida. My degree's in agriculture, ag business, and then I have a minor in construction. Straight out of school, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I didn't really know which direction I wanted to go. I'd always had a great interest in cattle. I'd spent some time as a kid or growing up, working cows with some guys from this area, particularly that taught me a lot about cowboying and I was, so I was kind of confused as to exactly what direction to go. And then I had an opportunity present itself when I was 22 from a friend of mine from UF who grew up in Fort Lauderdale in town and who knew me well and gave me the opportunity to interview for a job in orthopedic medical device sales. So orthopedic medical device sales, I knew nothing about. I had heard, through the grapevine that medical sales could be lucrative and this, that, and the other, but I was an ag guy through and through, and I still am, and I never wasn't throughout, over the last 15 years, but I really didn't have much interest in medicine, but, I was convinced time and time again, hey, your personality's, suited very well for this. Well, so after about, I think it was about 10 interviews, I ended up getting the job. And when I got the job, the company I was working for at the time was Biomet Orthopedics, and they about 3 years later they became Zimmer Biomet Orthopedics, which is the largest orthopedic implant company in the world. But they wanted to put me down in Miami-Dade County, which is the epicenter of city of South, the metropolitan area of South Florida. And I just respectfully declined, and I said, "Listen, there's no way." I said, "If you really want me to take this job, I need to be on the Treasure Coast of Florida, which is where I'm located currently, which is Stewart to Sebastian, essentially, and then west to Okeechobee area, and it's a lot more rural. It's honestly, it's might as well be two different states, but
Mhm.
nonetheless, ironically, the guy who hired me, who had the distributorship at the time, he said, "Well, I just acquired the Treasure Coast as a part of my territory, but we've had zero representation there ever." And I said, "Well, give me a shot." And he's like, "Well, you don't know anything. You don't know anything about orthopedics. You don't know anything about your sales. You're, a young kid." I said, "Well, I mean, if you like me that much, just give me a shot." And so he gave me a shot and he gave me a little tap on the butt when I walked out of the office and said, "Go get him." He said, "Next year, a year from today, you're going to be 100% commission. Let's see what you can do." And so, I walked out of his office and I moved up here permanently and started to try to figure it out. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have a senior rep to rely on or anything like that. And as you can imagine, orthopedic surgery is not, it's not something that's basic to learn. Surgeons take 15 years of schooling and all that to get to the point they're at. And the only other avenue to really get is know as much about orthopedic surgery as let's say a surgeon does is to do what I did for almost 15 years. And anyway, so it was about 7 years of really, really, really struggling. I mean, just grinding and thinking to myself, and this is in my early 20, my 22 to 28, I'd say, where I was, I was questioning myself daily. Can I do this? How am I going to possibly eclipse the senior rep who had been in the territory for 30 years, who owned 90% of the business? And I'll give him a shout out. Paul Golden is his name. Um, Ended up becoming a good friend of mine. He was in orthopedics for the glory years and did very well. And he owned that market. I mean, owned it. No one in the history in 30 years had been able to go into that market and even penetrate it by anything. I mean, it was striker dominated. And I can recall there was one evening where I was in the back hallway of St. Lucie Medical Center putting some trays together. It was like 9 o'clock on a Saturday. And Paul Golden, who didn't speak to competition, looks over at me and he goes, "Pat," and I was shocked that he even knew my name, and he's like, "You've got something here that's special." He's like, "I've been doing this for a long time, and I've never been threatened or felt like there was anybody that could potentially take business from me." He's like, "You're that guy. Don't ever stop doing what you're doing. Keep doing exactly what you're doing." And I was kind of baffled because I was like, man, he's like telling me that I'm a threat to him essentially, but also encouraged me to keep going, and I remembered that statement for years. I mean, for years. Sure enough, when I relinquished the territory back to the company about 2 years ago now, I was doing $40 million in revenue. I had 90% market share in my territory, which was 4 counties, and Paul Golden retired because I took all the business. So
Nice. Oh, dang.
you know, that was my story there in orthopedics, man. There's a lot more to it than that, but it was a very, very challenging, um, experience for me for sure. But learning the principles of how to run a business because I was running my own. I was working for a large corporation as an independent contractor, but I was responsible for at the end there up 200 surgeries a day on some days. I had to manage the, huge team of employees. And in that industry, which differs greatly from this industry, which is I'm still learning, is that you can't make a mistake in orthopedics. I mean, like perfection is the expectation. And it took me a while to get used to getting back into the real world where, you know, if something is a few minutes late, it's not someone's life or death on the line.
Mhm.
Once again, even though they're completely separate industries, I think the lessons that I learned and the things that I became comfortable with, which the main thing is being comfortable being uncomfortable. I mean, I was forced to go in there and, do my job and sell product to surgeons who had been operating longer than I'd been alive
Right.
explain to them why my product was better than what they were using. And that was a terrifying thing to do for many years. But once I figured it out, and once you get it down and you understand your cadence and how to do things, it actually became almost simple. And I didn't even realize that I had the skill set that I had really until after I left. And, I started, 3C a little over a year and a half ago, or actually a little bit less than a year and a half ago, honestly. Um, and I'm just walking into government prime contractors built, job sites and handing out business cards and talking to PMs and it just, like I said, that experience in orthopedics really it just sharpened my sales blade to the point where those sales conversations are not intimidating to me, and it's been a way in which I've been able to really make a mark early, moving the needle. So
So, man, you've just been what a massive transition in terms of industries though. So, the start of 3C, I guess it comes down to, I mean, you take the leap of faith. What was client number 1 and how'd you get 'em?
let's see. Client number one was a girl named Kayla Richmond, actually, and she had about 10 acres in Fort Pierce here that she needed her pasture renovated. Uh, that was severely overgrazed, covered in oak trees, no shade or no sunlight. And she was wondering why her pasture grasses weren't growing and it was full of weeds. And actually, a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, she had posted on a Facebook Treasure Coast equine group that she needed someone to help renovate her pasture. And a friend of mine Sandra Couch, who I've known for
On Facebook?
many years on Facebook. Yeah, she
Okay.
just tagged me, and I
Oh,
reached
okay.
out and went out and did a herbicide application, but was dealing with a very difficult problem and one that I've dealt with many times since then. Which is people who own 5 acre parcels, maybe 10 acre parcels that have horses. I don't want to generalize here, but it's a specific type of person that just can't accept the fact that they're like, when I tell them you need to let your pasture rest because you're never, what's going to happen is your horses are going to graze all your grass down to nothing, and you're going to have nothing but weeds left. And we're going to be doing the full pasture renovation, meaning burning down everything and starting from scratch. And it's problematic because honestly, I would say 8 out of 10 of those people they just can't even fathom that. And it's like you have to supplement your horse if you want your pasture back. Get supplement your horse's feed. She was my first client, and I killed a bunch of her weeds, the real problem was that she had no sun. She had, I think, four. Gosh, I can't remember the number. Maybe it was 50 mature oak trees in a 7 acre pasture that were just shading out all of her grasses. So I told her, I said, "Hey, listen, we either eliminate some of these oak trees, thin them out, or you got to find somewhere else to put the horses for a little bit, 6 months while you give your pasture a chance to recover, and then fertilize and give it the proper protocol post recovery, so that you never, rotational grazing, supplementing with more hay, so you don't get to the state you're at." And yeah, that was the first customer, and customer number two was the Hewitt Corporation, which is like third largest construction company in the world.
Okay.
And that was for a huge herbicide application project that spanned the entirety of the C 2324 Sneed header section of the Everglades Restoration Project. And um, so I applied herbicide selectively, well, both non-selective and selectively to in totality it was 4,700 acres or so,
Mhm.
and that was job number two. Yeah.
Oh,
So
pretty
right off
pretty
the rip,
pretty good job number 2.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
something I know about you is, like, you have a ton of equipment, which not cheap equipment. How do you get
Correct.
started in that? Like, what's the, 'cause I mean, do you buy the equipment and say, "Okay, the jobs are gonna come?" Do you get the jobs, then buy the equipment? How did you approach that?
That's a very, very good question, man. That's a very, very good question. And I'll tell you, I wish I had approached it differently in hindsight. So, throughout my career previously, I some money saved. I mean, and not a tremendous amount. But I did have, I was working in medicine, so half of my income went to the government. But I spent, because I was so heavy on, I got my commercial applicator's license right away, and because I was looking for ways to differentiate myself from just the everyday guy that can ride around with a pickup truck and a trailer and a skid steer and call himself a land clearing guy. So I leaned heavy. I did a bunch of research, and I really leaned into the precision agriculture side of things, meaning precision agriculture is a term that is broadly used to describe many different aspects of technology that's now used for different things within the agricultural or land management world, right? So it could be anything from drone mapping to prescription-based herbicide and fertilizer applications, GPS map tracking, auto guidance on machines to make them more efficient in terms of how many passes you have to make. Everything is logged. Data is, especially when it comes to like herbicide application, for example, this is a big one. All your application data is logged. It's all your environmental factors are logged, and these are all things that I found very quickly that the government organizations and specifically the government organizations, but also even large private landowners, they want to see that. They want to see that you said you did what you say. There's tangible evidence that you did what you said you were going to do, and it's also a very beneficial thing to me as well because it helps me manage my input costs, right? If I can do a multispectral drone scan, for example, let's say for round numbers on a 100 acre pasture, and there may be 4 different soil types. That drone scan coupled with the soil samples that I take, I can extrapolate the data out from both of them and create a variable rate prescription for the fertilizer application which is going to give whatever the crop that you're planting. Like, so let's say I'm planting a hayfield, for example, and I'm planting, we'll just use one varietal, we'll say Hermathia grass. Okay. That's generally a grass that's planted in a damper, moisture soil than others. But for Hermathia, let's say we're doing 100 acres of Hermathia. Well, I can go ahead and do a pre-planting drone scan, and that drone scan will give me the vegetative indices, how the current vegetation is doing. It'll give me a soil profile based on the moisture, the density, and the moisture density and temperature of the soil. It gives you a topographical scan, so you can in DJI Terra, which is the program I use. Once you take all that data and you put it together, you can really get a good idea of what types of soil you have, and then where the water is moving on any given property, and what you need to do to mitigate that, or change, or improve water flow, or create, if you've got standing water, do different things to manage the water flow on a property in which you are growing, whatever crop, whether it be cattle to hay to vegetable, whatever. So I'm able to use all this technology that is available, that's been widely used in mainly the Midwest. And Florida is 50th out of 50 states to adopt it. And that's a phrase that
Hmm.
I've said a lot of times. But Florida is the largest agricultural state east of the Mississippi. So if you think about that, I mean, we're the last state to adopt precision agriculture or precision technology of any type, which has proven to increase yields, has proven to reduce cost, has proven to create, compile data that will be able to be used not only on that particular rancher, farmer, landowner's parcel, but other parcels. And as we collect data overall, right, we're able to determine, hey, on this particular weed, let's say whitehead broom, which is a new weed that's become very problematic in our area, when I'm data logging, I know exactly what volume of what herbicide cocktail I applied at what time, what the humidity was, what the temperature was, wind speed, this, that, and the other. And through that data compilation, we're able to kind of extrapolate that out based on post application results and determine, hey, maybe it's more effective to use this treatment when your average humidity is X, or your temperature or your soil temperature, so it's a data collection, but it's also primarily for my customers. The data collection is going to be, for the long term, is obviously going to be great because it's going to continue to improve what the technology can do. But in the short term, what it does is it offers me the ability to cover the full spectrum of services that a private landowner may need efficiently, effectively, give them tangible documentation and evidence that the job was done right, and with actual numbers and maps that show exactly the areas applied. And through economies of scale, because I'm capturing, let's say, like, there are a lot of instances now, more so than ever, with the people moving to Florida, where there's these pet parcels of land that are anywhere between 5 and, let's say, 500 acres. More likely 5 to 40 acres are what these people are buying. But a lot of these guys are families are from either, metropolitan South Florida or out of the state, or they're investors, and they don't know. I mean, they're not, they they buy a piece of land, they see it, but they don't know anything about invasive species, about how to
Mhm.
treat them, about what wetlands are, and upland preserve areas, and all these different things that we do, to make sure that they stay within compliance with the water management district, and also to just keep their property as high in value as it can be by maintaining it to the highest level, and doing so, like I said, with these methods that show them tangible, real evidence, via, a drone, like I said, drone scan or whatever it may be, as the younger generation, or people, I say younger generation, I mean, I'm 40, but you know, just the old guard, like my dad, for example, he's 80 something years old. You show him something in technology, he's gonna, like, throw out the garbage. But, people, a couple, even in their 50s and 60s now, they're starting to get it, and they know. And I've had lots of conversations over the last year with legacy cattlemen, that are very well aware of the fact that things are changing rapidly. And if they don't get on board, they're going to get left behind. I picked a good time, I believe, to really lean on this business model. And I've been able to capitalize thus far on the model that I created and how I'm able to capture all those different segments of the scope of work needed by the customer.
So what was your first piece of equipment though that you got
The
to like
first piece, like, that I
to
had purchased for the business,
for the business? Yeah. Because I mean,
I
I figured that will be a tough barrier of entry. Let's say somebody listening to this podcast wanting to get into the land clearing space. I can imagine it looks intimidating just from the amount of equipment and the amount of investment that you have to make when you take that leap of faith that, hey, this is what I want to do. So
yeah,
like what did you do and then what would you recommend?
man, I'll tell you, that is a problem that I'm currently I would say that that is probably my most significant issue right now. So, the biggest barrier to entry, I would say, is the capital expenditure, that the amount of money that the equipment costs to do the jobs, right?
Mhm.
Let's just give you just a basic skid steer. I'm not talking about a dedicated forestry mulcher. I'm talking about a skid steer, right? So, and we'll use a Kubota, for example, like a new Kubota 97.3, without any implements is $105,000. Okay. My Lamb Track 6160, that's a $500,000 machine. And I bought that, and that's used. Now, does it have an extreme amount of capability? Absolutely. Can I clear acres and acres of land with it on a daily basis? Absolutely. But it drinks about $1,200 in diesel a day,
Double
10
that
gallons of
lately.
well, that's no, that's at today's prices. So,
Okay.
12 I said so I said $1,200, right? Not 1,200 gallons. No, it takes 100, yeah, but, so I had to fill in the fuel tank twice on that thing. So, it's an extremely expensive piece of equipment to run.
Mhm.
Now, if you are in the dedicated land clearing business and you are just going through and you have DOT contracts, let's say, or contracts with FWC or the Forestry Service where they want you to go. I mean, that machine is designed to go in and just, I mean, I could walk it through the woods and just take down everything in front of me. So that piece of equipment, I'm in the process of buying. I'm actually, it's a friend of mine's who's selling it to me. So I basically took over payments on it. I got lucky there, but the maintenance on it is insane. But initially, the first couple things that I bought, truthfully, Matt, were herbicide application rigs because when I started the business last year was January 1st. I don't believe I did my first job until April, if I'm not mistaken. So it hasn't even been a year. Oh, well, it's about a year now. Okay, so that I did my first job as 3C Land and Agricultural Services. And we were getting right into spring, summer herbicide season. So I bought a Polaris Ranger XD 1500, which is which I don't know if you're familiar with, but it's side by side, but Polaris is it's got the payload and towing capacity of a 1-ton pickup truck, essentially like my 3500 Chevrolet. And I sure put that to the test, I'll tell you. I bought it. I put a 100-gallon skid sprayer in the back of it, and then created I had another friend, and who is now a friend, another local mechanic from Okeechobee who kind of believed in me and what I was doing, and was able to really. I mean, he did a lot for me, and if it weren't for him, I might not be here as well. But he custom fabricated some different boom options so I could do fence lines very efficiently with my ag leader unit, boomless options for broadcast application. And then I bought a 300-gallon Best Way Ag spray tank, tow behind spray tank that I put a 35-foot folding boom on for broadcast applications with what we call boom buster tips on the end. So it's got like a 55-foot swath with 300-gallon tank capacity. So on this big Southwold water management jog that I was describing to you earlier, I was able to cover, because you need to be able to cover acreage, significant acreage in a small amount of time, given Florida summers and the rain and all the different things that occur that slow you down. So that was my first big, like, purchase, and I bought that outright, both of those outright, and then granted, like I said, I had saved a little bit of money when I was working, and then I bought a second one of those machines very quickly afterwards because I realized the capability of it and how many different different applications there were other than herbicide that I could use it for. And so I bought 2 of those, and then once again, just being heavy on that herbicide application, I ended up buying/building a platform spray buggy for wetlands restoration projects, and there's a lot of those that come about. Actually, I'm in the process of bidding one now, where the state, South Florida Water Management and or FWC or FDACS, Florida Department of Agriculture, they regulate, what type of vehicles can be inside of these environmentally sensitive areas. And fortunately, buggies, wheeled buggies are allowed to be able to, there's a lot of stuff you can't access via, side by side or whatever. And then the chances of tearing up the wetland is much higher than if you have big floater tires on a buggy. So then I went and bought a buggy, used it quite a bit last year. It was a very, very useful tool. Mounted a 300-gallon tank, had it custom fabbed on there. Um, so, those were my first 3 big equipment purchases. And then a John Deere 6155 tractor, in addition to my Kubota that I already own, that Lamtrack forestry mulcher, Chandler fertilizer spreader and manure spreader. Um, Gosh, what else? There's more. 2 equipment trailers. I sold all of my cattle. Well, most of my cattle. I'm getting back into the cattle business now, but I sold most of my cattle, so I sold my livestock trailer. I was kind of just like selling equipment that I had to acquire more equipment. And I had all this upside, right? Like I had so much go in me, and I could see the gaps, the holes, the need for my services.
Mhm.
I could have a conversation with somebody, and by the end of the conversation, that project manager, let's say, that had been working in the industry for 35 years, was looking at me like, dude, you're doing something that nobody else has done before. And I'm like, it's not that revolutionary. I just was thinking, I was like, man, there's really nobody that's like, just why don't people try to capture, more of the spectrum of services that these guys need and keep it under one roof? Why pass off simple jobs that you know you can do with the right backing and capital and equipment, of course, but none of it is it's all within the same general scope of work, right? Like it's not like
Mhm.
I'm going from land management to you know installing high voltage electric, right? It's like as long as it's within that land management, landscaping, hardscape, like it's all within that same scope of work. And it's all and it all kind of intertwines. And once you develop a relationship with these decision makers, which I've really tried hard to make a priority in my life in general. Like once you have that relationship, they're going to call you and ask you what you can do for them. And if you say no, I've been a big ask for forgiveness, not permission type guy my whole life.
Mhm.
And I saw something yesterday that said, the key to success is biting off more than you can chew and then figuring out how to chew it. And that hit me pretty deep, pretty hard because, I'm thinking to myself like, yep, that's about it. I mean, it's like, I know in my heart of heart, I know what I'm capable of. And it's
Mhm.
just like, yeah, a lot of people would never leave the security of what I was doing to kind of to start a venture like this. But Matt, I gotta be honest with you, man, I couldn't be happier. I mean,
Good.
it's stressful, don't get me wrong, it's stressful, but it's certainly fulfilling.
So
Fulfilling
what
and
has
worth it.
been in this first year, like, what's been the most, like, humbling thing for you? Got any, like, disaster stories?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, nothing like disaster stories, like, I didn't mulch up a human being with the mulch or anything
Okay,
like
good.
that.
Yep,
That's good.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, nothing catastrophic like that, but just, um, really learning the bidding process of
Okay.
some of these larger scale jobs and not fully understanding all the variables associated with
Mm.
this bid process. Because
That would be a huge one for most new companies that you guys are just always undercutting yourselves and
yes,
without even knowing. Yeah. Yeah, what happened there?
I mean, I lost my ass on 2 or 3 big jobs last year.
Oof.
And it's like you're caught in this dichotomy, right? Because you can like I can go sell the business, right? If I could sell this wetlands restoration project, for example, that I was talking about earlier. I had never done a full scale wetlands restoration project. I mean, I had sprayed some wetlands over the course of the years for buddies, on hunting, on their hunting leases and whatever. But like, we're talking about a full scale wetlands restoration, combing through 260 acres of wetland preserve that's monitored by South Florida. So my little 3C at the time, a couple months old, won the bid, and I matched the former company's price. And I thought it was low, but yeah, at the same time, I was like, you know what? We'll just power through it. We need the exposure. We need
Mhm.
this job. I need to be able to prove to myself and others that we're capable of doing jobs of this scope. Well, we pretty quickly realized that the amount of non-native vegetation in this place was, I mean, tremendously more than we on our initial, kind of walkthrough were able to see. And I was in there for a long time. I mean, I was watching. I mean, I would not joke, but I would think about it on a daily basis. Towards the end of last summer, I'm like, man, I'm sending these crews out here to go spray. I might as well be burning $5,000 a day. Just watching like this. Just, but then again, I'm the type of guy, and I'll always be like this. And this might be for some of your other listeners, some of your other business owners. They might look at me and shake their head and slap me on the wrist. But I, and I know for a fact this has got me in trouble before, but just my conscience and what I say I'm going to do, like it's so hard for me unless there's a very legitimate reason. And don't get me wrong, I'm not willing to say no if there's a legitimate reason. But if I quoted you a price and my quote was to fulfill a certain commitment, which is to get you in compliance with South Florida Water Management District, and I realized halfway in the project that ain't gonna happen at that price. And the HOA director was unwilling to submit a change order. She was playing hardball. So I made the decision as a business owner. I said, you know what? I'm young. I'm new in business. I don't want the reputation as the guy who just goes in and half-asses a job and doesn't complete it. So I did. And you know what happened? In turn, all the wealthy landowners in that neighborhood now use me exclusively for all their herbicide application, all their pasture
Nice.
and all. I've got like 10 projects going on. So but there's a win behind every well, you learn from every loss, right? And as long as you don't make those mistakes over and over again. I mean, I tend to like to think to myself, I don't make them ever again. I can't say that's true 100% of the time, but if you're conscious and you're consciously thinking about every little detail of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and once again, this business is different than what I used to do, but there's equally as complex, like nuanced concepts when it comes to bidding these jobs, especially at scale, because there's so many variable factors that could change your input costs or your time spent on the job or all these different things in drastic ways. So that has been something that I lost my ass on, and I'm getting much better at bidding accurately and wording things and speaking to these decision makers in a way in which they're used to being spoken to by my predecessors and people that do similar things, and let them know like, hey, I'm no longer the new guy on the block, although I am. My name has started to gain some traction. People have started to see my work and respect it. And I'm no longer having to come in and say, hey, I'll just do this at whatever the last contractor did because I need the exposure. So, but yes, bidding jobs at the appropriate rate. And then also, like I said, making sure that you take into account every possible variable that could change that.
Yeah. Um, okay, so obviously we're not we're not going to be underbidding, or at least we're going to continue to get better. And obviously, like as you grow, your reputation grows, your experience grows. I'm sure that you're going to be able to command an even better price. Um, have what's your 3 to 5 year picture look like in terms of your company? Like, what do you want to be? Like, what do you want your company to be? What do you want your role to be in your involvement? What is how different does that look like in 3 to 5 years versus today?
So It's interesting that you asked that. I've got several 3 to 5 year projection plans that I've structured, but, I won't even open them up because I'll just explain to you. So, you know, m what my so I'll start with my role, okay? So I don't wanna dumb it down as simple as this, and but I truly believe that it really is this simple, okay? I have a handful of buddies who are phenomenal operators of equipment, who could easily learn how to do all the aspects of what I do as an operator, that have no interest in ever running a business. They just wanna go work their ass off, maybe run a crew, be a team lead, and they do a good job. They're great communicating with customers, yada, yada, yada. I need to do everything I can to get out of the field, other than the sales interactions, obviously, and manage the business from a higher level, right? Work on government contracts, work on these HOAs, work on meeting with people in high places that make big decisions, FPL, which is Florida Power and Light. There's not, gosh, without sounding arrogant, there's just not a lot of me's out there. And these corporate guys, they want to hear a story told in a certain way.
Mhm.
And when I can have a conversation about this modern technology that's going to benefit them tremendously and save them money. And here is why. And I've got white paper data to prove it. And I can show you how when I'm bidding your job, I'm bidding it as a vegetation management proposal. I'm not bidding it as a herbicide application. I'm careful about how I word things on these bigger projects because when I bid when you bid something or when you explain something to a customer, especially on these larger scales where you're like, guys, like not I'm not just gonna come in and spray a herbicide and wait for the guy behind me to do the mechanical treatment with the mowing. I said, I'm gonna do the mowing too, because that way I've got eyes on it at all times. We can catch anything before it gets too prolific if we're there behind doing the mechanical and the herbicide treatment. So like where I need to grow, I'm getting off track here. Where I need to be in let's say 3 to 5 years, hopefully 3 years, is in the CEO position, managing the business from the highest level, and then have, hopefully in 3 years I have 3 to 4 running crews. And then in 5 years, 5 to 7 years, man, ideally I would like to be the dominant company in this space in the 5 to 7 counties that surround me. And, I think it's all very possible. As a matter of fact, I know it's possible. Um, there's really nobody that's doing what I'm doing. And the advantage that the guys that are doing similar things are is that they have, a family that has a significant amount of money to, purchase equipment and fund them and all that. And, quite frankly, I'll say fortunately for me, I don't. And everything you see here, everything I have is stuff that I've earned. I bought. I bought this house when I was 26. Um, so you know what? Like, I'm not disappointed that I don't have someone to lean on for that. But I think that with the traction that I've gained thus far in the various segments, by the way, of like between large private landowners, commercial or government and prime contractors, and then commercial work, I've touched every segment, and I've been in business for a year, and every single job I've done has been received with in extremely high regard. So I think, I've got a whole pitch deck I put together today, Matt. That's pretty comprehensive, and I've got a few people that are very interested in potentially investing, and I know what that number that I need is to make this happen. And with one office full-time dedicated office person, one full-time operations manager, couple more crucial pieces of equipment to hold me over in the short term, and me just being able to go out and do what I do. Honestly, man, if I wasn't netting $2 million in revenue next year at this time, I would be a failure because it's all there to be had. I can't go get it as quickly as I want to because I'm waiting on this cash flow. It's like,
Mhm.
so that's where I'm at. But that's part of being the young business owner. And I'm finding that out, quickly, is that You see a lot of guys out there that do not so great work, have kind of shitty reputations, but they're still working. And it's like, man, how the hell is that guy still got work? Well, because he's got the access to the equipment, his mom and dad have money, he can do this, that, and the other. And it's like, I'm trying to eclipse that and trying to change the narrative altogether without offending the legacy cattlemen and,
Mhm.
and, and landowners. And that's another big factor, right? Is like in South Florida, man, these cracker cowboys, which is what we call ourselves and they call themselves, they are the most stubborn sons of guns you'll ever meet in your life. I mean, they won't even vaccinate their cattle the way modern vaccinations work that are proven. I mean, they do it, everything's old school. So penetrating using the comprehensive scope of care coupled with the data accumulation and using modern technology to increase the efficacy, efficiency, and overall cost input reductions to the customer while benefiting me through, like I said, economies of scale, being able to capture all those different segments has been a business model that I know is going to, I mean, it's worked. It's been well received. These customers aren't communicating with 10 different subs, they're communicating with one person. Everything is organized, so the model makes sense and it seems so basic to me. I mean, it's really not a complex business model, right? There's other examples of this business model in many other industries. I just didn't realize that it didn't exist here. And I saw an opportunity to capitalize and like I said, I'm a big ass for forgiveness, not permission. And I just went, man. I just went and I said, hey, figure it out.
Yeah.
That's where we're
So
at, bud.
one thing that I've loved kind of following your journey with is how good you are at finding and adopting like new technology. I work with a lot of people in the green industry, and I mean, our owners aren't called to be the most tech savvy. You don't have to be, but you
Right,
choose
sure.
to be. And you're really good at like I said, not just using it, but even finding this new technology. What's kind of been the latest thing in terms of technology that you're most excited about? Is it anything related to AI? I know you got drones and all that stuff. So, like, what's the thing right now for you that you're like diving all in on?
So I gotta be honest with you, man. I had slept on AI forever. And I'll tell you, I don't know how I like
How you did
I
anything without
graduated
it?
from what's that?
How you did anything without it?
Well, I don't I just started off I started using it to do some automated stuff. And then I
Uh,
just started to, like, dive a little bit deeper into it and some of the more, like, complex platforms that are able to, like, combine ChatGPT and Claude.
mhm.
And son of a gun, dude, like, it's like I'm like, "Dude, if I was in college again and I could just, like, freaking snap in a couple things and they spit out this report for me." I mean, I still managed to graduate from UF somehow. Don't ask me how, I was Captain Morgan the entire time, you know? But gosh dang, like, I'm, like, thinking to myself, I was like, "You don't even have to do anything anymore. You just have to give it a little bit of info." And, one of the things I've used it for recently, which has been phenomenal, is I'll use a program called Land ID. I don't know if you're familiar. It's an app, but it's a very handy app. So it basically gives you individual parcel information and then it lets you overlay. They have a bunch of different contour mapping options and then overlay, like, for example, like if I'm clearing a fence line, right? So I can walk that fence line and based on my position and or GPS coordinates, I can tell that overlay a fence right in that area. I mean, all sorts of things. But what I can do is I can take that screenshot of that parcel and it has all the parcel information, parcel ID, and then upload that into whatever AI platform I'm using and say, hey, can you create me a proposal on what the input costs based on my current pricing? Because I have a huge, Excel spreadsheet with all my pricing on it and everything. Based on my current pricing, can you create me a proposal to take this 100-acre former watermelon field that needs X, Y, and Z based on the topography, dist, level graded, post soil test results, lime application potentially, all the different input costs that go into it. And it'll spit out a freaking report that looks like, so professional. And it's like,
It looks like you spent hours on it.
Yeah, dude. And I did. I spent hours on all that stuff, man. Like, I don't
Yeah,
tell
of
anybody any different, like,
course.
but it do I mean, but Matt, I'm being honest with you, man, it's like it's almost like 'cause I write well to begin with. I've always been able to write pretty good, and, but sometimes I'm just like, "Holy crap, dude, like,
Yeah.
how is this possible?" Like, I would have to have spent so much time doing I've done the research and I've got the data compiled, but still, I mean, it's and the way they integrate with each other and like how I can do automated tasks with my CRM and emailing and responding to things and it's just getting more and more every time I log into some I use a program called GenSpark. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Nah, that's a new one for me.
Yeah. It's like Perplexity. Yeah, have you
Okay.
heard of
Okay.
Perplexity? So it's very similar to Perplexity. Although the GenSpark may be spying on me, I'm not sure. I got these pop-up windows that started popping up recently. I don't know what that's about. But, but it's very comprehensive, man, and, ChatGPT was the first thing I ever even dabbled in, and it was great for a lot of reasons. I mean, it does a lot, but it doesn't really remember it does if you have the business version, but it's limited. So when you can mix all, like, the big ones together that are better at different things, I mean, the proposal, like pictures and, like, just, like, taking like, honestly, I'll be straight up with you like job site pictures, right? So pre, post, mid job pictures. Take that picture and I'm like, man, there's dirt right there. Let me send that sucker in and have nano banana or whatever the deal is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, can you make this look like that bald spot's got grass? Where my employee spun the skid steer around and dug out a hole.
Yeah.
And 2 minutes later I got a friggin' beautiful grass pasture. It's like, geez Louise, man. But it's just little stuff like that, like, I just would have never had the ability to do that in years past, and the automation stuff is something that I'm really looking forward to diving deeper into, especially
Mm,
as a owner-operator who's responsible for so many aspects of the business. The more that I can automate, the better in terms of, like and then obviously you guys are playing a big part in that too in terms of, like, the marketing and, with the lead connector app and all that. So yeah, so AI is exciting, but man, there's so many other things that are exciting too, man. Like the drone technology stuff. It's exciting, it's disappointing at the same time because I've got probably two of the most handy enterprise level drones that you can own, and they're both DJI. And there's a lot of litigation and a lot of craziness going on around DJI drones right now. And I certainly cannot use them on any government jobs, which
mhm.
sucks. Now, the private landowner stuff, yes. But who knows what the future holds because no, there we don't know. But the bottom line is that I own them and they're the best on the market and they're like a quarter of the price of an American drone of lesser quality. So, I'm really leaning on that too because you know, now that I've got the advanced DJI Terra package, which cost me gosh, I don't know how much money it costs, but now that I'm able to do these 3D oblique models coupled with multispectral imaging model, like all these different things, and yes, it's a little bit of time on a computer and doing some modeling, but when you hand that package over to a landowner, and I'm not talking about like a guy that owns an acre, I'm talking about 40, 50, 60 acres of land clearing or wetlands or whatever, you know, or you send them a file that they can manipulate in 3D. I mean, the effect that that has on that customer is something unlike I've experienced, you know, elsewhere, right? Because they're looking at their property and oftentimes they're older, right? They're on that on acreage and not some young kid. And their minds are just blown by the fact that this is even possible. And I'm like,
Mhm.
no, this is a 3D model of what your property looks like. And then I can go from there and I can say, listen, let's take a look at it. I will mark out the areas that you want cleared and I'll be able to note that in my machine, so I will only clear these specific areas that you want, and it's all based on water flow, water levels, historical, like, so you can really be precise with what you're doing. When it's not just this old redneck, "Hey, I'm gonna go in there and just, mow your whole place down."
Yeah.
So, people are starting to realize like, holy this technology exists, and 3C Land and Ag is the company that's really the only company that's got it, that's pushing it, and that knows about it. They can have an educated conversation about it. It hasn't hit here yet, which has been hugely advantageous to me in my business.
Yeah, let's go, man. I'm super pumped to watch you. Because yeah, you are. You said this earlier. There's not a lot of Pats out there. You're definitely very impressive in everything that you touch. So it's been an honor that you even chose to partner up with us on this, and it's been really cool getting a chance to know you. Okay, so if there's somebody listening right now, whether they're in a corporate job or not, and they're considering getting into land clearing, um, what would you say to them? Would you would you encourage them to do it? Would you caution them? Would you say don't?
That's kind of a loaded question.
It
This is what I
is.
will say. This is what I will say. If you have Okay, so if you're in corporate America, I feel for you. I will never go back. I spent 15 years working for a huge corporation, and I won't say on the podcast what I told the CEO of the company, but I left, but it was not very nice. And, I really truly feel like, and I'm not saying all, but a lot of big corporations, they just, no matter how much I was successful, no matter how much I achieved, no matter how much I provided them, they just don't care about you. And I realized that I had a skill set that was different, towards the end there. And I was like, why am I doing this to make all this money for these guys that don't give two craps about me? And so I left. But that being said, I'm not the average bear, right? Like my wife, for example, polar opposite of me, and which causes tremendous amount of tension, especially right now, because she's worried about like, the dirty carpet in the kitchen. And I'm like, I can't even wrap my head around like that being a problem, right? Because I
Yeah.
have so many things on my so if you are highly driven, highly focused, understand, and you came up in a corporate position in which you had to sacrifice a tremendous amount of your own personal time that was extremely difficult to learn or to navigate, and you were successful in that regard, and you realized like, hey, this is the most important thing in my life right now, and I have to make sacrifices. And now that's where the balance or lack thereof comes in. It's like, how far do you push it? Because, you don't want to lose your family, and there's so many stories out there of guys that are just so driven and hungry to get the business. I can say that for myself, quite frankly, and I'm being just completely candid. You know, I I have a feeling like if I let my foot off the gas for a second, it could all come crumbling down.
Mm,
So I have to constantly be working. But my answer to answer your question would be, if you are a highly driven, motivated person who is truly confident, and when I say truly confident, I mean truly confident. I hired and fired a lot of people over the course of my time in orthopedics that when I interviewed them, they told me they were willing to work all these hours and that they could learn anything and blah, 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 blah. I mean, I can't tell you how many were gone in a month after realizing like how hard it was. It just takes a special person that is willing to take and you have to be a risk taker because there's no other way that you would ever be successful in a venture like this that does cost as much money as it does. You have to be able to lean on your resources, people and you really have to sell yourself to your friends and your resources, your family too. It's all a sale, even though I don't want to treat it that way and I don't think of it that way. I really don't. But what you're doing is you're selling yourself. You're selling your ability to complete, or to execute on this plan that you have presented in a way in which it's going to the ROI, you'll break even at X amount of years, and then ROI year 3 through 5 will be this. And you have to do it based on factual data, based on, what you're capable of, and then find ways to put the people in place around you. I'll tell you, that is one of the biggest things that I learned in business in general. And I was bad this way early on in my former career. I was so unwilling to let go of the reins. And, this is something that's common in business and it's been talked about a million times. But I mean, I was a control freak, man. And I would go behind my guys in orthopedics to make sure that and then once again, the stakes were very high, but I still did it. And then finally I reached an epiphany. I'm like, I can't do this. I have to let them fly. Like, I have to let them go because if I can't let this guy go, how am I gonna let the next guy go? And then so you just have to be able to just and then the other thing is hire slow and fire fast. The first inclination that someone gives you, they're not gonna work out for whatever that is, you gotta move on. And
Trust your gut.
as hard as it is to do sometimes because you need the help, those people can be far more damaging to your organization than helpful. And, you know, I'd say finding good people right now is not easy. Or the generation behind us, Matt and you and I are probably pretty close in age, but like, I mean, I hired lots of early to mid 20-year-old post undergrad college kids over the last handful of years. And I mean, the entitlement, the demands for making X amount of dollars a year and, like, just wanting to go home at a certain time, this, that, and the other, and it's like, you have no clue what it takes to build a business. Like, you don't like, they just don't even I would say most of them. There's certainly unicorns out there, but it's just, like, the unwillingness to even think outside of the little bubble of a world that they live in
Mhm.
and expect their employer to like reward them tremendously financially for nothing with no experience, and whatnot. So finding employees has been a challenge. Overall, working capital, I need another $3 million in equipment, man. It's just a fact. I mean, I'm growing at a rate where I'm committing to jobs and I'm having to sub a lot of stuff out that I could keep in house. Um, but I don't have the equipment to do it
Mhm.
currently because I've spent over $1 million on equipment last year. So, I fortunately have access to a lot of equipment through friends that I've been able to really, really take advantage of, and they've been phenomenal to me. But I can only do that for so long. My conscience will only let me do it for so long, and I'm in the process of, putting this proposal together, and I've got enough interest in what I'm doing, the way I'm approaching it, what my track record has been thus far. Shoot, once we get this marketing campaign launched, I mean,
You're moving at the
sky
speed
is
of light in the industry, man. You're doing some incredible stuff.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm really looking forward to the marketing campaign. It'll that's gonna what that's gonna do is that's gonna give so a lot of those large parcel landowners, the big ranches and stuff, what we talked about is, a lot of times they have their own means for the most part, but these large parcel landowners that are much more frequent than I even knew,
Mm,
um, those are the people that don't know anything. Generally speaking, have the funds to pay for it because they just bought, 50 acres at $100,000 an acre or whatever it is, or more than that. You know, those are the customers that you can go in and someone like me, who can speak the way I can, whatever, and especially if they're from down south, I could talk the talk, do my thing. But every single one of those turns out to be a super positive interaction. And, oftentimes, you know, I hope too many people don't watch this, but as a cattleman, these people own grazing land and they want to get their green belt, their ag exemptions. Well, what they'll do is they'll ask a neighbor, like, "Hey, they don't know how to do it. So they'll ask a neighbor, "Hey, who's got cows on your property?" And the neighbor will be like, "Oh, it's, Jacob Larson, whatever, big cattle." Well, those guys don't give two shits about, Mary Smith's 70 acres. They just
Mhm.
know, "Hey, there's grass over there. I'm gonna turn my cows out. I'm not gonna fix her fence. I'm not gonna fix her gates. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna spray her pasture." So I put this whole proposal together where if I have after the initial treatment, you give me your grazing rights, I'll take care of your pasture in perpetuity. Now,
Amazing.
that earns me income multiple ways. One, cattle prices are as high as they've ever been. And number two is drought insurance. And I don't know how much you know about drought insurance, but it is it's almost hard to believe it's real, but there's a ton of are you laughing because you know about it or are you
No,
familiar with it?
no, it's I could see, like, the gears turning when you're ready to talk about it and what it's,
I mean, I almost feel like I'm committing a crime by speaking on it, but it but and I'm also very disappointed in myself because I had 100 head of cattle for many years and I never collected it. And
Mm.
I know people that are making 3, 4 million dollars a year on drought insurance. So anyway, I'm not going to take this too long, but basically all it is a policy against the average annual rainfall for the year, and it pays out quarterly, and it hits 8 out of every 10 years. So 2 out of 10 years, you may have to pay your policy back or your down payment or
Mhm.
your initial investment. Now, if you can't don't have the money to do that at the end of the year, which oftentimes is $10 or $20,000, not much. You just roll it over to the next year because the odds are so high that you're gonna hit the next year that and you don't come out of pocket at all. It's not like I have to give them 10,000 again. So, a buddy of mine, I was talking to him last night, he took out a $20,000 policy this year. He's made $37,000 on it Q1, and that's paying back the 20. So that's he made
Yeah. Oh,
57.
wow, okay.
So, I mean, Matt, I'm talking about real money. Real money.
Yeah,
So that's a whole nother little just as an aside, just kind of way to capture some of these, little recurring forms of revenue that could absolutely help, boost the business and provide working capital.
awesome. Well, Pat, we got a lot to talk about, man, and I'm really looking forward to running around too with you, really getting into
Dude,
the
let's do it,
details
man.
and all the
We
stuff.
we live like a hop, skip, and a
Yeah,
jump away
we're
from
very
some
close, and there's no doubt in my mind that you and I are gonna go share a drink very, very soon. But we're gonna call it a wrap today. Like I said, we got a lot to talk about in the very near future, and I'm excited to run this back with you. But for now, that's gonna be a wrap on this episode. So, Pat, you are the man. Thank you for joining me.
pal. Thank you, man. Matt, honestly, brother, you guys have been great. You guys have been beyond great. I can't even begin to describe to you how happy I am being a part of your team and um, you know, I just appreciate you taking me on as a younger, newer company and believing in me, because I know that's not something you've typically done in the past. Um, so just that in itself means a lot to me, man. And I want you to know how much I appreciate it, and I know that once we get this thing rolling and there's a few little pieces of the puzzle that just need to connect, and then I foresee our stresses being not the ones they are now, but,
Right.
your stress levels change over time and they become, "How in the hell am I gonna get all this work done?" So it's the future is very bright now. It's very, very bright, and I'm couldn't be happy to work with you guys, so,
It is my pleasure and my honor, Pat. So thanks,
yeah,
man.
likewise, man.
I'll definitely be in touch very soon. We're gonna wrap it up today. Thank you everybody for joining. If you got some nuggets or anything that you think anybody else would be able to take away from this, please feel free to share and definitely encourage anybody that is watching this to be on the lookout for the next time Pat and I connect and go over everything. Thanks a
Appreciate
lot,
you,
Pat.
man. Your service.
Yeah, yeah, get the plug in there, man.
Yeah,
See you.
see you.